All right, well, hello today, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to KQ2. We have a very special guest today. We have Democratic candidate for United States Senate, Lucas Kunce. Thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Kunce.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Let's do it.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll start out. We'll do some serious questions and maybe a few not so serious questions.
Okay, sounds fun.
So here we go. So today in St. Joe, you visited the Union of International Brothers of Electrical Workers. Why is it important for your campaign to have the support of unions?
Oh man, it's everything for me. So, you know, as a kid, I grew up in mid-Missouri. My parents are like your typical mid-Missouri story, right? Like, my mom was 19, my dad was 22 when they got married, and they were Catholic, and you know what happens when Catholics follow the rules?
Exactly.
Yeah, so kid, and the paycheck-to-paycheck lifestyle that goes along with that. But you know, we lived in a great working-class neighborhood where everybody took care of each other, and the best example I can give for that is, you know, the reason my parents actually stopped after 4 kids is because when my littlest sister was born, she had a major heart condition. She was flown from almost immediately flown on a helicopter from mid-Missouri up to St. Louis for surgery. She ended up having 3 open heart surgeries, and you know, something like that is really hard for a paycheck-to-paycheck family like the one I grew up in. And so, you know, I had to watch my parents struggle, not just with whether or not my little sister was going to survive, which, you know, thank God she did, but also how they were going to take care of the rest of us. And, you know, it just took 2 months. My parents went bankrupt from that. And the reason we made it through that time is because when we were at our lowest point and my parents didn't know what was going to happen next, the people in that community who had no more money than we did, you know, no more money than we did, they passed the plate in my mom's prayer group for us. They brought more food by the house than we could eat. They took me and my other siblings into their houses for weeks at a time while my parents were having these, you know, we're in St. Louis for these surgeries. And it's just, that's the strength that we have in our everyday communities when we have good union-paying, middle-class jobs where people have enough resources to take care of each other. Those guys down at the IBEW, they understand that, right? They've lived what I lived on one side or another. Either they received help before or they've given help. And so for me, you know, it's important to be down at the IBEW. It's important to support labor because of 2 things. One, I want to fundamentally change who has power in this country. The people who should be calling the shots are people like everyday folks here in St. Joe and the people in my neighborhood who took care of our family. So that's the first reason. And the second reason is that, you know, we got to invest in everyday people again. And that's one of the hallmarks of my campaign, because when we got the resources, we can make our own decisions and take care of one another.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I also grew up in a Catholic family, but my parents stopped at 3, so I was the 3rd. Who's your favorite famous Missourian?
Well, I got it at this very moment. I think I got to say John Goodman. So I don't know if you know this, but John Goodman voiced over a video for me. You know, he had an upbringing that, like, he really feels connected to mine with. You know, his dad died when he was young. His mother struggled to make it, and he really, like, he had the support of his community. You know, his scoutmaster and other people. I was an Eagle Scout, and that was, you know, one of the ways I got to see our great state and just get around and sort of live a normal life, right? And so, you know, for me, I love John Goodman. I love his work, you know, from Roseanne back in the day when my parents watched it, all the way to up through like Monsters, Inc., right? My middle kid, his name is Sully, and John Goodman voiced Sully in Monsters, Inc. So
Very good.
I'm going to go with John Goodman.
Yes, I'm a big Monsters, Inc. fan as well.
Oh, good,
so
man.
There you go. You ran in 2022 for the Senate, and you lost to Trudy Bush Valentine in the primary at that time. What did you learn from that, and what's changed in your campaign since then?
Well, I think the real eye-opening thing for me in that campaign is it is hard for everyday people in this country to get elected and represent people who are like them, right? Like, my family comes from no money. After I graduated from school, you know, I didn't go work somewhere fancy. I joined the United States Marine Corps because Marine veterans specifically, had helped my family back when we were struggling, right? And these guys were my heroes. I used to go down to the Marine Corps League as a kid and just, you know, just admired everything that these veterans did, because no matter how hard they had it coming back from Vietnam, many of them lost their friends there, and, you know, they were struggling with everything that you struggle with when you go through something like that. They still took care of everybody in their community without looking for any glory or anything like that. And so, I spent my life, I spent 13 years trying to be like them. I deployed to Iraq. I led a police training team, 12 Marines and a Navy corpsman on dozens of missions outside the wire, up and down the roads of Fallujah, Habbaniyah, Ramadi. I deployed to Afghanistan twice, and I thought that was the best way to protect and serve our community. But, you go back to the neighborhood I grew up in, and man, I watched our country spend $6.4 trillion supposedly nation building at Iraq and Afghanistan, and the neighborhood I grew up in fell apart. The first house I lived in is an empty lot. The one they brought food by and that I joined the Marine Corps out of is boarded up to keep the squatters out. The store on the corner where my sister and I, when we were 8 and 6 years old, would walk by ourselves to go buy candy, was shut down because it was robbed so many times it couldn't get insurance anymore. And so for me, I believe that that's because we have politicians who don't understand everyday Missourians. They take money from the wrong people and they sell out. And so, in the first campaign, I was like, I'm a normal guy. I don't want to take any corporate PAC money. I don't want to take any federal lobbyist money. I don't want to take big pharma executive money. No money from these people who are literally stripping our communities like the one I grew up in for parts. And what I learned during that campaign is that's hard to do, man. Our system is built for those people to control our politicians and buy them off. But, we did it my way. We didn't win the first one, but this time around, we're continuing to do it my way. And $30 at a time, we've raised $14 million. We have really broken through because we've built something real, and everybody knows that I'm in a position now where I'm only going to represent everyday Missourians, and I haven't sold out. And so for me, we learned how to do that in the first campaign, and now we're running that truck all the way to the end zone, and we're going to win this thing.
Yeah. Last night I was watching the Democratic National Convention, and during the roll call, the delegates from Missouri, they mentioned you and talked about how, they're hoping that you beat Senator Hawley in November. Does it ever strike you as odd that you hear your name being mentioned at such a big event like the Democratic National Convention? Has it quite hit you yet that you've reached that sort of notoriety, I guess?
Well, I guess what I'll say is, and this may sound a little weird coming from a guy who's running for U.S. Senate, but I've never watched a political convention. I've never been to one, state, federal, none of that, and so I actually missed that. But because for me, it's just all about everyday Missourians. But I do think that's cool that they shouted me out, and the real thing that's going to be cool is getting into the U.S. Senate, and in 2025. Actually working to fundamentally change who has power in this country, voting to protect organizing workers, and just being able to be a U.S. Senator who hasn't taken money from a lot of these wrong folks and being able to just make decisions for everybody in this state. That's when it's going to be big for me, is to go in there, go into the United States legislature representing the people of Missouri and just stand there and know that I'm standing on my own 2 feet and the only people who got me there are everyday Missourians, and it's going to be a thrilling feeling.
So coming up in November, Missouri is going to be voting on 3 amendments to the Missouri Constitution. One of them is abortion. Why is this an important issue, and why is it important that Missourians got this on the ballot through petition?
Well, the issue itself, as far as the abortion issue, is important because this is about women's health. This is about all of our rights. It's about our ability to make decisions for ourselves and decide how we want to raise, build, and protect our families. And so for me, I believe that Missourians are smart enough to make their own decisions. And I don't think that a politician's job is to rule people, right, to tell them how to live. I think it's to represent them. And so I think what you see, and not just in this initiative petition, but several others we'd have over the last few years, is people in this state are tired of people like Josh Hawley deciding how they get to live, right? He wants to control us in the bedroom, in the doctor's office, in the workplace, right? He wrote a book called Manhood where he tries to, tell us how to live as men and, says that to solve the masculinity crisis, we all need to be more like him. That's weird and that's creepy. What I want to do is not tell people how to live. I don't think that's what Missourians want. I want to just help everybody, invest in folks so that they can make their own decisions. And, again, this ballot initiative does that, and so did the one where we overturned the anti-union right to work. Josh Hawley's right to work legislation, we overturned that in Missouri 68% to 32%. We expanded Medicaid. We increased the minimum wage $5 over the federal level. Minimum wage is on the ballot again this year. It's going to win because people want to have power back. We made it so you can smoke weed on your back porch without getting harassed, right? This is people who want to make their own decisions. That's it. The people in my old neighborhood that I grew up and took care of and who took care of me back in the day, they don't want politicians telling them how to live or what to do. They want politicians investing in them so that they can make their own decisions.
For sure. You've talked about a lot recently about how you were a Marine for 13 years. What is the best thing about being a Marine, and what is the worst thing about being a Marine?
Well, there is no worst thing about being a Marine, man. The worst thing is that it ends at some point, and you're not out with, with your Marines anymore. I think that's the worst part about it. Although I'm still in the Marine Corps Reserve because, again, so I did 13 years on active duty, and I've done 4 in the reserves. I got 3 left in the reserves because, again, I'm a normal person. I got to have that TRICARE for my insurance, which I learned last year. I had my wife and I had a baby last year. He's 14 months old now. He's happy, he's healthy, and everything's good. But he was born 2 months early. He spent 8 weeks in the NICU at Children's Mercy Hospital in Kansas City. It's kind of similar to what my parents went through back in the day. And, thank God that I had that military TRICARE insurance so that we could make it through that time, because it was a real struggle for us. And it's just, the worst part is that, someday that comes to an end. But the best part is everybody you hang out with, everybody you get to meet from all walks of life, all over the country, and just all of us focusing on one thing, and that's protecting America and serving the communities that we signed up for.
Yeah, for sure. This next question is a question from my mom.
Oh, how about that? Good thing we didn't let my mom ask the question.
Oh, well, there you go. So you've talked about wanting to sort of switch over to clean forms of energy, electric vehicles, things like that. Josh Hawley released an attack ad saying that you want to take away people's trucks. How do you respond to that? I
mean, it's ridiculous. That's one of the problems with our politics right now is that, political ads, you can really say whatever you want and you can just completely lie. I mean, I've been endorsed by the Missouri workers who make the F-150 truck right here in Missouri because they know that I'm going to invest in them and that I'm not taking anybody's keys away. They can't show anywhere where I've ever said that I'm going to outlaw or ban anything like that. And so it's just, it's absolutely ridiculous, and it's a shame that that's where we're at now politics. But I tell you what it really is that Josh Hawley's afraid, right? I mean, the guy he wants to control everybody. He knows we don't want that, and he hasn't invested anything in this state. I'm not like a hardcore Dem Republican guy, right? This isn't a left-right campaign for me. And when you look at someone like Roy Blunt, previous Missouri senator, Roy Blunt brought $350 million a year back to this state every single year in earmarks. You can see the results of that all across our state in projects. Josh Hawley literally brings $0 back here every single year in that. Like zero, man. Like neighborhoods like mine are falling apart because politicians like that won't invest in us. As our Attorney General, he led a lawsuit to make sure that more than 200,000 Missourians wouldn't qualify for overtime pay anymore, man. Like, that's the money we use to take care of each other. That overtime pay, that's the money that that we would use to buy our kids a second pair of shoes during the school year. Something that I really watched my parents struggle with. And so it's just, when you see ads like that, like the only thing you should see besides the lie is fear. That's fear because he knows he's not taking care of everyday Missourians, and he knows that we're going to punish him for that.
Speaking of ads, you released recently an ad about the border. The southern border. What kind of action would you like to see on the southern border, and what makes you the best candidate to help with that issue? Well,
great. This is another thing that Josh Hawley's a fraud on. And so, my background, before I led that police training team in Iraq, I trained with the Border Patrol at our southern border. I did it. I haven't taken field trips down there like they did. I trained with them as a Marine. I've been certified by the Border Patrol Tactical Unit, and I know what needs to be done, right? Like, when those guys endorsed a border bill last year, Josh Hawley voted against it. Like, what we need to do is we need to fully fund and equip the Border Patrol. We need to shut down the flow of fentanyl, and we need to end catch and release. Like, it's pretty simple, right? And the crazy thing is that Josh Hawley's voted against all of those. He didn't just vote against the one last year. A few years before that, he voted against funding for fentanyl scanning machines. Like, that's how we stop the fentanyl coming through. Most of it comes through border crossings. We had machines, he refused to fund that. And in fact, if you go back, we were talking about Roy Blunt a minute ago. In 2019, Roy Blunt negotiated a border bill, a bipartisan border bill that passed by a wide margin, and that Donald Trump signed into law, that funded Border Patrol, built actually 55 miles of border wall, funded border wall, and did several other things. Josh Hawley voted against that too, man. He doesn't want to solve this issue. He doesn't care about our safety, right? Like, he wants us to stay unsafe so that he can keep this issue as a campaign prop. I think that's disgusting.
Yeah. I will ask you one last question. We've talked quite a bit about Senator Josh Hawley. I was wondering, is there one positive thing that you can say about Josh Hawley, about his work in the Senate?
Well, I will say this. He attempted to get the people in St. Louis some relief on a RECA bill for nuclear and toxic waste exposure. They've really suffered through over there, and he wasn't ultimately able to get it through, probably because he doesn't have any good relationships in the U.S. Senate. But I will say, at least he tried on that. I wish we had a guy who would try on a lot more things, and I wish we had a guy who hadn't sold out so much. But the people in St. Louis who are suffering from a legacy of nuclear waste, they deserve relief. They deserve the ability to have their houses bought out. And as a U.S. Senator, I'm going to tell you what, I'll pick that ball up and I'll make sure it actually gets across the finish line.
All right. Well, that'll wrap it up here today with Lucas Kunce. Mr. Kunce, thank you so much for joining us here
Absolutely.
on KQ2.
Thanks for having me, everybody.
And thank you for watching, and I hope we have more opportunities to talk with Mr. Kunce in the future.
I hope so, too.
Thank you very much.